Friend, today we're going to be talking about the guitar. A little bit of history and then how to get down on that fretboard. One of the ideas on guitar is everybody hears it, they want to just jump right into it and play. Now, everybody has their own way of learning how to play the guitar, but the origins of the guitar sometimes help in the understanding of how the best way to learn is. So, once you get a little bit of know-how on where the guitar evolved from, where it came from, you add a little bit of vocabulary, you know a couple names, you learn a couple styles and genres, and then it all really falls into place. For me, this is like a 40 year endeavor. I am in my 40s. I started playing when I was 15, and the idea of playing a D major was all I needed. I played like a D minor 7, and I said to the person I was playing with, when will I ever use this chord? And how funny and crazy immature that was as far as just a observation of my own grasp. The long and short of it is, I use the variations of the fingering patterns for that D7, D minor 7 in a multitude of ways over the fretboard. And since guitar was kind of like the first stringed instrument that I played, it makes sense to go back to the origins of the actual instrument. So, the first original guitar-like instrument was around 1500 BC. Now, this is a long time ago. All instruments came from communal gatherings where music was used interpretatively to describe stories and settings, almost like tales sitting around the campfire. There was not the interwebs, so people really didn't have something to do besides tell stories and keep up tradition. Most of these traditions turned into something we would call organized religions, where they speculated the grand question of existentialism. In music, it's kind of funny because a lot of the lyrics that we have for current music is like, baby, baby, I love you, and yeah, loving you. But most of the things we see in our daily life are very, very fear-based or very, very, different emotions that aren't exactly described by love. I would say they're more described by indifference or hate. And one of the things that I find fun about music in my own reality, and that I find really interesting about the social observation, is it's almost a dual existence. Music done by troubadours, poets, and alike, allow to give stories in our modern day sense. Now, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. My folks, believe it or not, even though their views are completely abstract from mine, we listened to like the Moody Blues, stuff like that, and I often wonder if they would have only listened to the lyrics and would have only listened to the feelings and the stories behind these, maybe it would have broken through in their dogmatic decisions on everything they do. But not to get too much into that, the idea of music essentially for me boils down to the fretboard. When I play, I like to go through different notations to warm up. These are just spider exercises, what I'm calling them. This is the best way to learn how to play your fingers in between the frets and then move up and down the fretboard. As we progress, the Hittite civilization used guitars for entertainment. This is about 400 to 600 years later after the time of the first invention of a chorded instrument with a hole and then a string which produced a vibration. That is how we describe the, chordifers. Anything that has a hole in it, as a sound hole would be our modern day sound hole, and then has some sort of string, whether metal or gut. Now, gut strings, which is where the guitar gets its kind of concept. We had, before guitars, we had a multitude of different instruments which led to the guitar. So, the most that people know about these instruments would be like something called an oud or a lute. We also have different variations of these that progressed, but during the 1400s, the Romans really adapted something called a lyre. A lyre was just a piece of wood shaped in a crescent or shaped in a horseshoe type of design, and then had individual strings in betwixt that were tightened. Now, these strings, they're called gut strings. One of the most ingenious things that happened was being able to take these strings and put them together and tighten them at different tenses. When you pull something taut, the tauter it gets, the more high pitched it gets. Hence, high strings are thinner strings tightened, and then lower strings are thicker strings that are tightened. Each one has a different vibration. Now, gut strings were made from the intestines of different animals. They would be taken in 3 different strands, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, and then they would be slicked down in the sun, braided, and then hand rolled. And when you hand rolled them, it pulled all those different nodes together from stringing it together. And then they dried them in the sun under different strengths with weights. Now, they would clip them, wrap them around a 90-degree angle, and then tighten them or wind or bind them using eventually, after several thousands of years, into a peg system. Before that, they were just attached over the top and then clamped down. And before that, they were put through a circumhole and tied on a knot. And then they would dry to the apparatus. Now, the problem with the lutes and the ouds and all that, they weren't very loud. And until I would say like the postmodern industrial revolution, the strings themselves were, very, very quiet. So these weren't done in large auditoriums. And the problems with the ouds and the lutes, regardless of how many strings they had, they would go out of tune instantly. So you would always be in a state of tuning. I heard historians say that those who did play the oud, or the earliest versions of where we would say the predecessor of the lute is, they would call it a chitra. It came from Portugal or Spain. Now there are many different places where these originated on their own and then were changed, but sometimes people from different lands, like I'm going to butcher the name, Yanqing, I believe, came from the Chinese dynasty, went over to Spain and Portugal, saw that the lutes there had more than just the 3 strings that they were accustomed on their instruments, added a 4th string, and then when they got back to China, changed the stringing system to have a lower string closest to the individual rather than having a higher string. Thusly gave one more string to what we would consider the modern day lute. After the turn of the century, around 40 AD, the Roman carrier used to play the chitra, and almost every city-state that had developed from there had people that were either like a barber. The barber would also be your dentist, and then while they were not playing, they would not doing a service like cleaning teeth, cutting hair, shaving off warts or whatever. They would be playing music. Now, in almost every one of these houses, you would have people that would be playing these instruments. So, like, there were different types of guitars. Before the guitar was the guitar, chitar. You also have, like, a timbre. These ideas were almost very close to the size of a mandolin, and they exhibited some of the different early aspects that the lute had, like a very, very defined sound hole with lots of orientation in the woodworking. The lute was very, very popular when it was, produced. It used the concept of a 4-string oud and then progressed through the idea of how it was made. Now, almost all original drums and all original guitars were based off the idea of some sort of gourd or some sort of cavity inside of a hard shell. Now, there are old mandolins, there are old precursors of the ouds that are made out of many, many different animals, skulls, shells. One of the earliest one was like a very small tortoise shell with a stick off the side of it. Very, very cool. The banjo itself, if you watch one of these exploration videos, it talks about how the banjo itself came from an African instrument that used a long stick on top of a gourd. Well, the gourd explained in there is the same way that these gourded lutes and ouds would have been made. They take a gourd, cut off the top, put a skin over the top, affix the skin to the top, and the sand that is inside of there helps the skin stay level, and then when it shrinks, because it's pierced into the side or bound by twine, would stay and then shrink to the size of the capacity. They would then have a hole drilled in the side or etched out, and all the sand would come out, thusly leaving a cavity. This led to us having sound holes or understanding the vibration of things after having something being played on the outside, whether it be percussion or whether it being plucked or even strummed. The different varieties of how we get like quarter notes, eighth notes, whole notes, half notes, all the different variations of notation, that fell into place and got its own name through the analogs of history. And it correlated and coincided with all these different times. So around 400, the Romans adopted the Greek timbre and incorporated it into their culture. The Moors managed to take that idea of the Roman citra with the four strings, making the oud around 700. From 1100 to 1500, the lute was used primarily in circles of the bourgeoisie. Now, even though that term wouldn't be coined for several hundred years, the idea of the caste system, being able to have those who did not have money, did not have the opportunity to learn the instrument and play it. Only the people that came from the higher classes were able to actually have these instruments because they were extremely rare and extremely expensive. When it traversed over the seas from the Asian and the African and the European cultures, it was made over across the seas to Spain and Portugal, where versions of the oud and the lute were being changed pretty much by the century. But when King Charles II had gone over and learned about different ways to create the instrument, it gained massive following in Europe at that time. So we're talking about 1800s. Basically, the guitars of that time were 5-stringed instruments, and some of them having gut strings, some of them having wire twine, because we were able to take thin pieces of wire and make those. In the 1900s, we know them as being the most popular guitar, but in the 1800s, they developed what we would consider the standard guitar shape, the body shape, representing the female, the feminine. Throughout history, most of our artwork resembles this shape, the hourglass shape. That's a sign of fertility. Long story short, the guitar itself, referring back to barbers, dentists, anybody who served a place in society that had downtime in between customers, I guess you would say, would have an instrument that would have eventually led to the guitar. Now, these guitars, or the guitar, actually you would call it, Guitar, guitar, was one of the first earliest ones. It was a smaller scale guitar, and long story short, many of the lady folk that would visit these establishments were of the persuasion of serving the community for the needs of, let's say, reproduction, to put it bluntly. Long story short, some people call them ladies of the night. Well, these ladies of the day would hang out, do the same thing that ladies of the night would do with all the gentlemen and all the other ladies. However, during the downtime when they weren't engaging in their practice, they would be playing the guitar. So the guitar basically was synonymous with women of lower stature in the proletariat class that would play instruments, and thusly the fight between the piano or the harpsichord at that time and then the newly formed oud and then this guitar became our modern day guitar. The people who fancied them, or at least the people in opposition to them that wanted the piano harpsichord to go on to be the quintessential class system divider, I guess. It would be known that throughout history, many people who gave lessons that sold instruments that were harpsichords and pianos tried to hand out guitars, the earliest version, to all of the prostitutes in town. So whenever a bourgeoisie woman would see a prostitute playing a guitar, they would immediately throw away their newfound love for the guitar and revert back to the piano or the harpsichord. A little bit of mental work going on there. Anyway, in the 1800s and 1900s, there are many different people who changed the face of the guitar. Most importantly is Torres. Spanish guitarist luthier that changed the concept of what the lute moving to the guitar was and gave us our newest current day, and then what stands the test of time as being just our classical string type of guitar. Now, there were different guitars before the Torres type of guitar where it resembles this body shape. The aforementioned King Charles II, when they went and then they added that fifth string, the Chinese emperor, each one of these, not Chinese emperor, Chinese musician, all of these individuals, they add a little something to the instrument in their own demographic. And what we're left with today, after we have the different types and styles of these guitars, like the Baroque guitar is just a type of guitar that was example of the region, Cordova. So when you see a brand name sometimes on these, like Cordova brand, there's a huge backstory which dates back several hundreds years, if not thousands of years. Our modern day guitar didn't add the addition of these two strings. In fact, most modern guitars would have had 4 strings. They weren't long scale at all, and they weren't even really played as accompaniment. They would have been played as somebody wanting to join the music or add more sound, playing not even tetrachords, chords that had our 3-note variations and 1 note added on, but we really didn't even have a symbol of those do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Those are 7 notes grouped together that the Western world hears. The Eastern worlds work in a multi-noted instruments, and these are called microtones. So rather than having fixed positions between different variables of vibration, there were a multitude of vibrations that the Western ear just does not put on their instruments. If you've never seen a microtonal guitar, stop this and go look it up. It's awesome. So around the 1890s, the Spanish guitar became the majority of what we do today. It exhibited the body shape that we have, the extended fret. It added on 1 bass string to make it a 5-string guitar, and then eventually added another string, working in the same concept of fifths and fourths. Now, this means that around the 1900s, guitar became a very popular instrument across the whole world. What had happened in the 18th and 17th century was different than the 19th century, and especially now going into the 21st, almost into the 22nd in the next couple hundred years, we will see the evolution of the guitar move from something that is just steel strings, metal frettings, wood body, into maybe something a little bit different, implementing electronics, or maybe a different way of designing the inside, which is a whole nother way of talking about the evolution of the guitar, moving from a gourd and then moving into a binding and bracing system. There have been extreme innovations that have happened because of this, and what we find is we are mimicking nature. Yay. So around the 1900s came to America as well. The discovery of the first electric amplifier was around the 1930s. There were audio and video recordings of acoustic players, but it was very rare to see a guitar being played in anything other than an entertainment type of venue. It made its break into classical type music besides the Renaissance and the Baroque era, because it wasn't invented then. It was a lute, oud, something along those lines. All the different types of variations of the guitar really solidified around the 1940s. The first electric guitar was called an ES-150, and you betcha, Gibson. It was made basically by taking concepts from everything that he had observed and put it on a platform to be able to understand how to amplify the string vibration using science by wrapping wire around a magnet and then making those electrical impulses pop. By doing that, we invented the idea of electrification, and the physics professor Sidney Wilson managed to create the first fully electric guitar around 1940, meaning it had volume knobs and pockets and swells. It wasn't just one volume. You could have multitude of different frequencies which wouldn't mesh with each other and cause extreme feedback. Also, there wasn't any danger of being shocked or dying from that. There was an old British comedian that did a little bit on that, how musicians are stupid. That they keep dying because they're plugging it into the wrong sockets or something. Didn't understand how the guitar worked either. It's just so funny to hear it. I would say the integration of the African American experience, plus, rightfully so, all of the different stealing that the white culture did from the African American culture led to like the 1940s, late 1930s, 1940s of different players that weren't just white people taking the concept of what they had seen other people do from either Europe, Africa, Asia, and then bringing it back to the Americas, or just being able to use that with a little bit of know-how. Now, there are great players, don't get me wrong, but the rock and roll that you know is an adaptation that is taken from great players like B.B. King when they were young. In 1949, B.B. King showed that there was a different way to play the electric guitar that had been done before. That style was mimicked by almost all musicians at the time, which led eventually to, like Elvis Presley. But yeah, it led to some of the greats. Chuck Berry, Jimmy Page, Frank Zappa, Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, George Harrison. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. And unfortunately, it's male dominated, but the long story short is there is also a different history if you look along with all the people who are partners, wives, business partners as well, that helped the guitar become what it is today. Now, the concept, it moved from such an interesting instrument that went out of tune all the time, that used gut strings, that made it across the oceans. They viewed how a type of instrument was very, very, very similar to the types of instruments that we have, Europe, and then in Spain, Portugal. And then moving the concepts over the next 200 or 300 years from just the 1800s, the guitar has become what we play today. Now, there are new inventions, like we have a 7-string guitar. You could even have up to 12 strings, huge frets. The idea is it just uses a system of stringing these notes onto which you can play the same patterns over and over and over again. Now, what I'd really like to do is take the time to explain what the fretboard looks like after this silly little history. And also, do your own research on the history and the time of the guitars. You're going to find a lot more information than I was able to remember. The basic takeaway from this is the current guitar has its place in American history because it is an adaptation of all the other guitars or guitar-like instruments that came before it. The immigration into the Americas at all times helped to make this. So the different concepts onto which we have came from different portions of the world, from people with different ideas, different languages, different ideas of who their God is or isn't. And all of these things put aside help to amalgamate and make what we call the guitar. Now, I think it very fitting that in our current day that a lot of people opposed rock and roll, Elvis Presley, even into the age of enlightenment and the, summer of love, folks. And as I alluded to earlier with the Moody Blues, stuff like that. If life was all sunshine and butterflies, we would all have just C major, D major, E major, F major, G major, A major, B major, and C. But life isn't all butterflies. Sometimes life is a little cruel, but we don't have just minor chords. If every chord was just a minor, we would always have just that feeling of dread, I guess? So the idea is we don't have just majors and minors. We have a little bit of a major. We do have minors. But the difference between the two help us be thankful, I guess in my mind, for the major chords and how they pull us towards those major chords, and then how our body kind of reacts. So one of the things I like to do is be able to use those along with the diminished, which is the 7th of the chord. Now, we're talking about the Western ear, and that's what I want to explain over the top of this fretboard. When playing the C, the D, the E, the F, the G, A, B, and C, we can stay centrally located with these 4 frets. It's a great exercise to get both of our hands in tune with each other. When we do just downstrokes and play right in the middle and not on the middle frettings, we get solid notes. Now, there are 2 types of ways to play these. You can either put your finger into it or you can play it down flat. One is a pointy style where the point of your finger builds a callus and you press directly into it, causing the string to go in between the two middle frettings in this little meniscus S type. Wonderful. All downstrokes help you figure out what this is, which is just rhythm, keeping tempo. So when you do this and you do downward strokes, not only does it help you find the string in proximity to where your swing or your gait is, but it allows you then to not have such a stiff hand going up and down like this. You have more of a swagger doing this, and eventually it feels like shaking a hand. When you do this, what you tend to have is a hand that moves freely in motion. So the first thing I always teach folks trying to learn the fretboard, do it while you're teaching yourself perfect rhythm. I did not have perfect rhythm when I started playing music, far from it. After a good amount of time working on understanding notes and notation, it led into being able to understand the fretboard and then work on rhythm at the same time. So that's what I teach as a string instructor. Down, 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 down. You can do all downward strokes. These help you do the smallest distance that is in the Western air. It's called a half step or a minor second, semitone. When we play these notes, we are just doing 4 random notes. There is not a rhyme and reason to this. The picking pattern that I'm doing on my picket hand is called alternating picking, onto which I do a down and an up stroke on the same string 4 times. This helps me get associated with where all these strings are in real time, and it leads to us being able to play in real time a little bit faster. We're not really going for speed, we're going for note articulation in my opinion. However, different strokes, different folks. When learning the fretboard, there's a very valuable thing you can do with just that exercise, but if you're not ready to learn the fretboard notes and names, no worries. I would say that the best thing to learn from this concept is 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go up and play the 5, 6, 7, 8, you now can view this as having a secondary quadrant. Or if you just view it as there are 3 quadrants of 4, which make 12, that gives you all of your minor seconds. So when you play any string, let's say the E string, E sharp is an F, F sharp, G, G sharp, or A flat, A sharp, or B flat, B, B sharp, or C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and E. Now all these have flat and sharp names. In fact, we can even name notes like C, D double flat. There are silly ways to do this in music. It's all based off concepts of intervals. So when we played that aforementioned, that's for a C major. If we were to do that same scale, that would be a D minor. And the most important thing to learn about this is once you learn one scale in one scale pattern position, you can move that scale pattern position to find other types of patterns. That's what we're going to jump over to the board and show right here. And I hope this correlates with your own learning process. To demystify this fretboard, there are 2 things you should do. Play these spider exercises every day. Try and do your 4 notes with alternating picking. You can even try doing other methods, which would be like a down, down, up, which later would turn into something called economical picking. It's more for doing rate picking and doing different strands of note rhythms, but it's good to know about them in the beginning before we get into something too terribly difficult like the fretboard. Most of us, when we start beginning guitar, learn how to play a C major. The D major and G major and E major and A major. There's a system called the cage system. So if you can play a C major, and then you can play a C minor, or a C major and a C minor, a G major, or bar chord, G major, and then move your finger for a G minor. You're absolutely taking these 2 dyads, which is a 1 and 3, which is a major third, and then taking another dyad, which is a minor third. When you combine them together, they make triads, and that is a chord. So when we play a G major, we have a spacing from the 3 notes that make up G major. G, A, B, C, D. G, B, D. When we flatten this, we are just changing the distance now between this and this. It's just flippity flops. So the stacking tertiarily for those dyads, which is what all music is based on, tertiary harmony, we would have our 1 to 3, G to B being a major third. And then we would have our B to our D being a minor third. When we play those notes, we get our G major. Now, there are 6 strings on this guitar. However, the top form of this is exactly what we're looking for. The 2 notes on the bass strings, the 5 string and the 6 string, are the 1 and the 5. So a 6-string guitar takes a shape like this and then adds in 2 lower phrasings. These 2 lower intervals make up our arpeggiated 1, 3, 5. So going over this from the eyes or the standpoint of the fretboard, we're going to jump on over to that fretboard right here, or jump over to the other board and take a gander at what the fretboard looks like. All right. So when we're playing on the fretboard, there's a couple different things to remember. One of those is that you only have to start with the notes that you know. So once we're doing this, you'll see how playing just on these strings, you will strengthen your understanding. What I like to do is throw out our fretboard right here. Since we have 6 strings, we're going to put that here. Then we're going to put our bar down here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I think I've been making grids all my life. That was perfect! Alright, so we've got our 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret, 8th fret, 9th fret, 10th fret, 11th fret, 12th fret. When we get up here to the 12th fret, it starts again. So everything we learn down here will be the same after the 12th. So honestly, we could write our E right here as being our open string. Our A is our 5 string. We have a D as being our 4. We then have a G string as being our 3. Our B is a 2. And then we have another E. So right now, we have this conscious idea of this is an open grid and it looks like it's a little bit too big. I don't understand what I'm doing and I don't understand where I'm supposed to go. Well, one of the things we can do is we can look at the guitar, and at the guitar, on each one of our frets, which means that space in between, you should have a marker at the 3, the 5, the 7, the 10. Some guitars will have it at the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9, the 10. Inevitably, you will find these 2 concepts. Your 12th fret will generally have 2 dots. You will generally have one at the 3rd fret. You'll generally have one at the 5th fret. You'll generally have one at the 10th fret. That's how many guitars are set out. You don't have to have them in 3rd. Here's a Yamaha. The Yamaha has none on the 1, none on the 2, none on the 3. Hits one on the 5, the 7, the 9, and then has it at the 12. So as you can see, you need to find out where your markings are. I have played on many Gibsons, many Alvarez's. They all do the same thing. However, right here, that 12 is definitely how it is. I enjoy the 5, 7, 9 markings because it helps me see this as a quadrant, quadrant, and a quadrant. The aforementioned quadrant that I was talking about would rely on us playing our 1st finger, 2nd finger, 3rd finger, and 4th finger. Well, when going through these nodes, let's pick a key. In common music theory, what we talk about generally is having something called the circle of fifths. So this circle itself, if we were to draw a C right here and count 5 notes away, C, D, E, F, G, we would be going 5 notes away in fifths. Meaning, out of 7 notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do, re, mi, fa, sol. Every single time that we do that going around in 5s, we get a new note. And the reason why it's super interesting and important while looking at your fretboard and looking at a circle of fifth is quite simply this. If you know that there is no C in your open notes, and you know that there is a G right here, You can then start telling the difference between intervals. Each one of these notes is 5 notes away. And more importantly, these 5 notes away are exactly 7 minor seconds. So let's look at this through the eyes of C major, which has no sharps and flats. What we're going to do is we're going to write the 1, the 4, and the 5 because they're the majors in the key of C. Our 1 chord is the C, our 4 chord is the F, our 5 chord is the G. So we have a C, F, G. Now if you're already lost, take a deep breath. The next 3 are going to be the minors. We're going to have a minor 2nd, we're going to have a minor 6, and we're going to have a minor 3. So when we go over here, we write our 2, our 3, and our 6. I like to write them in lowercase in the beginning, and sometimes I'll even put a jazz marking or a chart marking. For major, I would put triangle. For minor, I put minus. For diminished, we put a circle. And for augmented, we put a plus. Major, minor, diminished, and then augmented. Here, you'll notice that the 7th has the diminished. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So when we play these, we have tertiarily triads built off of dyads that form major thirds or minor thirds. Whenever we play any triad tertiarily, we are talking about doing this. 1, 3, 5 in the key of C gives me a C, E, and a G. Therefore, when I play C major, I know that the 3 notes that make up the arpeggios, ha, 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 are 1, 3, 5, 1. We can find them in each key. Ha, 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 ha. If you're working on vocals, that is a great way to go through your arpeggios and do a warm-up. If you see these as being the 3 majors, these as being the 3 minors, and then this one as being the diminished, you can shift this concept anywhere you want on the circle fifths and know what all the notes are inside of your key. Pretty cool, eh? When we go the other way, we call this the circle of force. Just like when we went sharply or augmenting, when we go flatly, we are diminishing. So what you're going to see is we have the same numbers that we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that's F, G, A, B. Now, we already have a B, but what we're really looking for is our B flat. This is the flat side. When we look at our notation through the eyes of this fretboard, this is where this concept starts to make a little bit more sense. Now, the idea is once you start clocking time doing these 2 functions together as a beginner guitar player, learning the vocabulary and your fretboard and chords and songs and playing with other people, it builds this kind of like tool bag, a tool bag of notes and notation that you could say, well, B flat, C, D, cool, E flat. E flat then goes to A flat then goes to D flat goes to G flat, and G flat goes to C flat. The reason why I'm putting those with these 3 is because we have something in music called enharmonic equivalences. That simply means that when you call something like a F sharp, the note that comes in betwixt these 7 notes, because remember, there are 12 chromatic notes, and then we just take away some of those notes to get because we're essentially doing a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. This is the spelling for a major scale that I just played on the guitar over there, and this is what it looks like on the fretboard. When you play and you write out these notes, you will have F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, B sharp is C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then 12th fret, same as open. We've got our E. This line is the same as here, so we're going to just replicate it, right? G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then E again. So we know now that all these notes are going to be the same notes over here, so we can just write them through, right? Ta-da. Sometimes it will behoove you when you're writing out the notes on the fretboard to go backwards as well. So you can say A and then say G sharp, G. Once going back behind here, you should start seeing the pattern that you did forwards, so you can do it backwards. So when they say learn something forwards and backwards, this is exactly what they mean. When you do this, yes, you can do an E flat, but I'd like to write these all as sharps right now, and then talk about those enharmonic equivalences. Before that, we would have D, C sharp, C, B, A sharp, and then A for our open note. D goes to D sharp, E, E sharp, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, B sharp is the C, C sharp, and then D. G goes to our G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, you betcha, G. And then lastly, the line that I'd like to focus on right now. When the evolution of the lute and the oud and all these other predecessors to the guitar came about, we had different ways of playing these notations and being able to hear the intervals. Now, the intervals themselves have been defined more since then. We have different ways of explaining our 7 notes in different orders. Like this one aforementioned, I named after a Greek city-state. Ionian is what we call a major scale. No matter where we do it or how we do it, it will always be the difference of a whole, half, whole, half. Even though I sang it one after. It would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. When we manipulate like the 3 and go 1, 2, 3 by flattening it a half step or a minor second or the smallest tone, we are talking about going that distance. Well, fretboard knowledge comes down to this concept. All music is viewed through the eyes of the major. Meaning, whenever you want to know what a C major is versus a C minor, the reason why we can hear what a major is because we know that when we play a C major, that the C major itself, that aforementioned scale, can have a C, it can have an open D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C again. With the guitar, not even thinking about it with this bass, but with just the higher end treble, you would see that the notes here on this B line are super important. Each one of these goes out 5 frets and goes up a fourth. E to A. E, F, G, A. 4 notes away. E, F, G, A. Every key would do that. This would have, of course, going A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. If you can see distances, what we start to do is see what a fourth would look like, or what a major second would look like, or a minor third, or a major third. So that calls into another idea on how to name these. We aforementioned talked about the minor second being the smallest. If we take a minor second plus a minor second, we get a major second. When we take a minor second plus a minor second plus a minor second, we get a minor third. Hence, when we do a minor second 4 times, we get a major third. The next thing we would have after the major third is the perfect fourth, which is 5 of these. When we do a perfect fifth, we're looking at 6 of these. When we do an augmented sixth or a diminished augmented fifth, I'm sorry, there's no perfect sixth. I don't know why I had that. Augmented fifth or a diminished sixth, we get 6th tone, and then our 7 tone would be our major. So when we move through these, you can see how C to C sharp would be a minor second, smallest distance. C to D is a whole tone or a full tone. We would have C to D. When we go C to D sharp or E flat, the same thing. D sharp over here, well, it's not there. How do we know what that is? Well, we look at these concepts. D is right here. When we go to D sharp, it's a half step in front of us, and it's right in between E. So we know that there's a tone in between. The concept that is a hard one for us to generally grasp is that on all of these, there is no half step between E and F or B and C. Each time we see an E or an F, there will always be these 2 notes back to back. So we kind of view these all over the fretboard as being something we look for. I mean, you can even put it here on our E and F, B and C, but it's already down there. Not going to define it. When we go to C sharp or D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, here's our E and F again. Here's our B and C. It's like finding hidden pictures. G, G sharp, A sharp, and then B again. When we do these, we are finding ourselves moving through a process of pattern recognition. So, the pattern recognition in this state allows us to see the notes that we're playing as scales. When we alter these scales in any way, shape, and form, we get new different types of scales and modes. Now, I'm not going over all of the different modes or all the different scales, but I can tell you that on this website or on this YouTube channel, you can definitely look at one of these playlists that talks about scales and modes. One of the really cool things about this is there's just such a plethora of information. And also, if you've made it this far in this video, kudos to you. The kind of concept behind having this is if we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and that represents all of our notes, then we could take that and manipulate that to get common ideas. So the spelling in the key of C major for a C major is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now that's one way to play that scale. The other way to play that scale, we can take that major scale and we can move it forwards from here, giving us C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. These patterns move together. So the concept is, if you play these notes in order, that's how we learn them. But we don't play all music. Ha 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 ha. We do stuff like ha 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 ha. And we hear what the distance is between those notes orally and then with our instrument. A lot of people learn piano at the same time because it lays it out flat, which is a great way to learn it. But guitar, by learning it this way and seeing it in a 2-dimensional form, and then putting your fingies on the fretboard and doing this and going, cool, that's an F sharp. You can look at it and go, cool, I know that chord. Because when you play an F sharp D and an A with an open D and A and an F sharp, you get a D major in a first inversion. We'll talk about what those are in a different lesson and episode, which is all found on the YouTube channel here on the playlist. But the one thing that I really kind of want to leave us with, is I got a student coming up here in 2 minutes, is this. The 2 major modes that most guitarists learn are called Ionian and Aeolian. The idea of learning the circle of fifths allows you to go C major has a relative minor. That relative minor is the A minor. When we do this on the circle of fifths, we can figure out instantaneously what all of our relatives are If you're not from Hawaii, learn this. This is called the shaka. It means hi, how you doing, hello, what's up, what's happening. Kind of peace be with you kind of thing here. When we do this shaka on the board, we get C to A, G to E, F to D, A flat to F. This shows us what our relative minor is, the 1 and the 6. In the key of C major, there are no sharps and flats. So we would have C, D, E, F, G, A, B. A minor, of which being the relative minor, A minor is called Aeolian, because the mode that is derived is this. It gives you a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. When we do that, we're just starting A from this. So if we were doing C major, and C major was this, and we just start there and we go, ho, half, ho, half, ho. We would have our A minor, A Aeolian, or we would call it A natural minor. A natural minor is the relative minor of C major. When we move to a different key, just for explanation, the reason why this is important to know on our whole board here is when we learn all of the patterns that are associated, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, or C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, containing just a scale right here, or C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Moving forward, those 3 patterns on this guitar and on every stringed instrument that is tuned in this same fashion, meaning E to A is a fourth, 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 fourth. When we play this fourth here, yes, but watch what happens here. When we play B to C, that's a half step, whole step, minor third, major third. We still move out. The difference between these is we cannot go to each one of these because this right here is tuned differently. Notice how when we go G to C, yeah, that's a fourth all day long, G, A, B, C. But G to B is not a fourth, is it? It's a third. So we tune E to A is our next note up here. A to D, D is our next note. D to G, G is our next note. These are all fourths, except G to B. That's a third. Then it goes back to a fourth, and then it goes back to a fourth. Meaning, if an instrument is tuned this way, and they most are, the ones we all play generally, the ukulele, the mandolin, they all have a tuning that works like this. So you can see this pattern work over all of them. And here's really the caveat to what I wanted to show today. When we play a major, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When we play a minor, we have 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. We are quite literally taking the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degree of any chord, and then we can turn that into a minor. So here's where the real fun really comes in. When you practice the practice of practicing, that means that you use your individual fingers on the individual frets of your guitar to learn how to press them down and to make a note sound out, all the while working with your strumming patterns, hitting those on down and up. That allows you to get a little bit of rhythm and get familiar with pressing these notes in. When you go to your instrument, if you are able to go F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, F sharp, G, G sharp. It doesn't make you the world's best player. It doesn't even hypothetically make you a better player. It just has association that when you do continue to play chords like an F major, and then you see an F major, or you see an F major, or you see it can keep going on and on forever. These are what we call inversions, where you're taking one of those notes from the triad and changing it so it's on a different scale position. Each one of these chords does that, and because of the stacking of these notes and the way they fall with just those 3 notes in a triad, we see that the different combinations of these chords make up our major chord, which is a 1, 3, 5. Our minor chord is a 1 flat 3, 5. But remember, we're just talking about the triad. In a minor, you still have to flatten the 6th and the 7th scale degree, or else you would get and that, my friend, is not called natural minor. That's called melodic minor. By having a natural 6 and a natural 7, you are altering the tone. The other natural option would be to keep the 6 flattened, and then the 7 is natural. That would be called harmonic minor. Sounds very, very Egyptian, very, very Arabic, very, very mysterious. There are only a couple different modes that come out of those 7 modes, and I'll just tell them to you, but we're not going to talk about them today. Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and then Locrian. The 3 and the 6 produce Phrygian and Locrian, which are very, 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 very cool sounding. And then if you haven't figured out what I was doing there, each one of those starts by dropping a note and then putting it at the end. So if I wanted to do Dorian, I would do this. Here's a C, so I would do is called D Dorian, because it's the same thing as playing C major. We're just utilizing the same notes, but in a different space in time. So, by going through a major and going through a minor, we would know that these 2 notes are the most common, or these 2 chords are the most common that we have. Ionian and Aeolian. So when we play these, that's what most guitar players tap out at. By seeing that this is C major, C, D, E, we can flatten this to an E flat. That would give us C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. The alteration to the major is how we form the minor. If you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, then of course you can flatten the 6th, the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th to give it a flat note, a flat note, a flat note. When you start viewing the fretboard this way, you start seeing these 3 patterns, one of which looks like this. 3 notes. That is a whole step, and the notes that are in between them look like this. The next pattern that arises that we just showed makes a minor. Well, that one is already here. That one looks like this. It's at the tail end of this. That's that scale, going all the way up from 3, 5, 7. What if we don't go to 7 and we just go right here? 3, 5, 2, 4, 5. When we come up here, we would have our B here. So these notes right here, if we played this same A note, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, we can have these 3 notes, which would make this whole step and then half step. And then the last of which would do a half step and then a whole step. Out of these 3 patterns, this is all the music that's on every fretboard. When you combine the patterns, you get different modes. One of the modes that is the 5th scale mode is called Mixolydian. Mixolydian, if we were to play A Mixolydian, we would have this. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. Well, the next note is B, then C sharp. Then it goes C sharp to D, then to E, then to F sharp, then to G. I'm sorry. Yeah, G. So watch this. I can't hit that high. Should have started lower. A, B, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A. The patterns that arise are these. Half step, whole step. Well, that's this one. Half step, whole step. The Mixolydian pattern are three of these stacked on top of each other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. You could add the 2, but that would become a 9 chord in a minor and a sus chord in a major. Then again, I digress. There's just too much to put into one video. I'm going to show examples of this on the fretboard, but this right here is one of the biggest takeaways. And then the second biggest takeaway is being able to see these three patterns. This is the whole step, whole step, whole step. Sorry, that is incorrect. Whole step, because it's in betwixt. This one's the half step, whole step, and this last one's the whole step, half step. Ta-da! This works hand in hand with seeing these. The diminished as being a 1 flat 3 and a flat 5. And then the augmented as being a 1 3 sharp 5. All music is based off of these 4 chords. Major, minor, diminished, and then augmented. When we hear them, I don't have a camera on the piano, but it does sound like this. Major, minor, diminished, and then augmented. All 4 of those are stacked tertiarily using major thirds or minor thirds. A major chord is major third plus minor third. A minor chord reverses that and takes the minor third first. A diminished is a minor third plus a minor third, and an augmented is a major third plus a major third. So, going back to the guitar, here's a guitar man. And I have a student in 2 seconds. However, I do want to show these. They are super fun and groovy. This is what I do for warming up. How about here? 5th fret, just doing spider exercises. Get those fingers moving. When you get to the top, go down to the bottom. Try alternating picking. Hey, music is reality. Yeah. Aloha, amigo. ¿Qué onda? Talk me through a 7th chord triad. Okay. Let's put that into a concept here. Hi, Chloe. How are you? Moonlight Sonata, 3rd movement. Are you talking about 7ths, or is that what you want me to do? I love the key of C sharp. Music joke. Let's keep on this pattern really quick. I'll incorporate the 7th in there in a second. What I was talking about are pattern recognition. If we were to play our first finger on the 5th fret, skip a finger, skip a fret, and play the 7th, skip a finger, skip a fret, and play the 9th, we would have the first 3 notes of A major. A major contains 3 sharps: F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. No matter where we play this scale, we are looking for these patterns, of which we could have said, what's the note right in front of A? A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp. So that G sharp is right before A. Well, one of the other patterns we were looking at was this pattern: half step, whole step. Well, that pans. Well, what happens when we do this? It changes that half step, whole step to a whole step, half step. There's where our pattern recognition comes in. The next string is the same as the string before it. So these 2 strings have 4, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7. The next one would be 4, 6, 7, 4, 6, 7. And then we do a move over to play this finger. That's how I see pattern recognition for modes. This is called Locrian. And it's all based off of just playing A major, but it sounds different because we're not just playing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Going into the fact, oh, by the way, Chloe, I'm not just going to take ridiculous requests. I'm trying to explain something right now. I don't even know what key flight of the bumblebee is in. If I had to do it, I'd be like, feels more like. Actually, that's lots of fun for the fingers. That's something that spider exercise would absolutely help with. I have no clue what key it's in other than that. Also, I don't know if there's any other movements besides the main lead that I heard. I used to hear a band called Mannheim Steamroller do it when I was younger. It was very cool. Anywho, yeah, if you want to check out Moonlight Sonata, I think I did a piano video on this channel about that a year or two ago. Anywho, going back to this. Scale patterns are being able to be decided by knowing that they repeat themselves. Whenever you change modus, they change the shape of that. So a major scale in our third scale, which would be shown through the eyes of C, we could have G. All these different scales have the same notes. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. So just by learning how to play a chord, like a D major, and say how many sharps and flats does C have? None. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. What's 5 notes from that? C, D, E, F, G. G has 1 sharp. That sharp is F sharp. So when we keep going, G, A, B, C, D, D has 2 sharps. Well, what's 5 notes from F sharp? F sharp. Oh, C sharp. So D has 2 sharps. So when we find the D note and we play a pattern, no matter where that pattern is, we find ourselves playing all those same notes. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. No matter how far you keep going, you don't have to start a scale on its root position, its 1-note position. You can start it on any note. And because I really have to stop here, I have a student coming up, I'm going to answer the question about the 7th chord triads. When you have a triad, it is based on tertiary harmony, meaning the first 2 notes are called a dyad. A dyad, in the case of, let's say D, is going to be D and F sharp. That is called a major third. Whenever you see this anywhere on this fretboard, that is what a major third looks like. The only other chord that doesn't do that is anything that involves this B line. Hence, what was a major third looks like a minor third for the case of A or B or C. Anything that uses this chord on these notes. The idea is, when stacking these notes tertiarily, the next note that you would achieve by stacking tertiarily, let's look at it. D to F sharp is a third. Well, F sharp to our A is also a third. It's a minor third. Well, if we take this A note and we put a 7th on top of it, we would have A to B, or A to B flat, that's a minor second. Then we would go to B, that's a major. The C is a minor third. And then when we go to the C sharp, we get a major third. So if we were to play D, F sharp, A, and then G sharp, all right, C sharp, we would get a major 7 chord. Well, when we play our D major over here, we've got a D, F sharp, and an A. Lower D, lower A, and then if you choose the F sharp, great. If not, don't play the low E on a D major. You get a D major. Well, flattening the D to a C sharp gives you the 7th scale position. When we play D, F sharp, A, and then that note, it changes the 3 notes that we use for arpeggiated chords. So an arpeggio in the key of D would be D, F sharp, A, D, F sharp, A. When we play these notes in succession, we learn them, but that's not how we play them when we're grooving. We would play something like a... Can't help but jam. Anyway, when playing, I use these pattern recognitions after countless thousands of hours of just noodling, playing, going over these modes and going, doing them in 2s, then 3s, then doing them in 4s, then doing putting them in 5s and then 6s, and then switching notes that were not linear. 1, 2, 3 could become 1, 3, 2, 4. So when practicing any form, I try to add the concept. This question about the 7th, why not play the chord of a D major as a D major 7? And then when you're using those notes to solo, the D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and then D, focus a lot on that half step now. You have changed and altered where that 7th note is. The arpeggiated structure could use always what those C sharps are. So you would have like, in a melody. You could add it. You know, I have zero idea theory. Some chords, yeah, but this is where it's at. Yeah, this is kind of where to start when you start playing chords. If you know the D major, or like, let's say A major. A major is another fun one. We could play it as a bar chord at the 5th fret. What I was just talking about was taking like our 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. The reason why I'm able to move through these notes and know that they're arpeggiated structures is it's based off of 3 notes from a triad. So the idea, which Tetris theme? There's 3 songs. I like the Russian one. Man, I put a lot of hours in on Tetris. Did you guys ever beat it? I only knew one person, Casey Niner. Actually 2. But yeah, Casey Niner. He beat Tetris when I was younger. Yeah, definitely is that 1990s, wasn't it? Yeah, I think I was 10, maybe 14, I'm 40 something now. Anywho, yeah, I can play generally anything I can hear just for the fact that when I listen to these notes on the fretboard, no matter what the song is, if you're like, I don't know, Dave Matthews, you can hear all these notes are just notes on the fretboard. In fact, you can play everything in different quadrants, which is why I teach this. Breaking out of just being able to play a major chord or a minor chord helps when you know how to make a diminished chord. And gee golly whiz, if you already know what an augmented chord is, you are in business. That means you could swap that augmented for any of your diminished chords. The real thing to start learning in the beginning is learning these scales. And once you learn the scales in all 3 of their different scale positions, what you realize is all of these different notes can move up the fretboard. So you can still do... It's still the same scale, but now the notes change. And this has to be the last thing that I talk about and leave us on. Fretboard knowledge, once you do the spider exercises and you get your fingers moving in notation, then knowing the names, the best way to learn it by far is the circle fifths, the thing we drew on the board. C major, G major, D major, A major, E major, B major, F sharp major, C sharp major. Even if you don't stay below the 5th fret and you move up, C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, G, you can do all of your scales. You can say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, and then C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp. So once you can go through all of those notes and know your major scale, that's when you flatten the 3, flatten the 6, flatten the 7th. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Well, then you alter those notes, which were C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, are now C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. If you can sing and say those the same way I am, I guarantee if you do what I just did for 5 minutes a day for 1 month, it will dramatically change the way that you view the instrument and yourself. You will be able to conquer these things instantaneously, I guarantee. And you have this YouTube channel now as a resource, and I love to answer questions. On Tuesday, if you have time, come and check out these explanations. The last couple have been about instruments, the history just very briefly, how to do what I was just doing there and start writing. If you know how to start writing and charting out these chords, you will be able to make music or take music that you've heard and analyze it. I hate saying it this way, but it really does come down to clocking hours. As soon as you have put 200 hours into the concepts that I just covered in just this video, and then check out the playlist, you will find yourself being able to answer questions that you never thought you would be able to answer about the fretboard, how to utilize that fretboard to start seeing these scales like at the open note of E. If I played E, 2nd fret F sharp, 4th fret G sharp, open A, 2nd fret B, 4th fret C sharp, open fret, or 1st fret on the D string is a D sharp, and then a half step to E, you can see how the scale pattern looks exactly and it sounds exactly like all the rest of them. We're just using an open note. But now we have a closed note system. These notes just move up in value. So when you want to play a chord like the aforementioned 7 chord, learn it in every key and then start utilizing your options for that. You will find that certain scales do not work with certain chords. That's the beauty of it. A 7th chord is called an extension chord because it doesn't deal with the 2 dyads. It adds another dyad which forms another interval. When moving these inversions around, if we were to take a 3rd inversion of this D major 7, I could quite literally put the 3rd inversion note, which is the C sharp, on the bottom. When doing that, it gives me this chord. Take it or leave it. That's what music theory does for me, and by doing it every day, whenever you're doing, here, pick a random key, how about, by playing E natural minor, and then when it moves into the A minor, playing a A minor pentatonic, and then a D major, or a flat 9, or maybe even the D major 7 didn't sound good, so I moved through the D major 7 to the D dominant 7, which is a passing chord, otherwise known as a 5 dominant, into a G major. You don't need all this vocabulary to be able to do something like this, but it tickles the brain when you do, and you start experimenting, especially when you have music partners and players and like you join workshops and you go to open mics and you do that. It's just lots of fun to be playing around. The hardest thing about theory is just starting to learn it. Okay, why put off till tomorrow what you could do today? That's how I feel. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. My name's Wago. If you do want individual lessons, I offer them. You could get a hold of me at bookingwagohanaho@gmail.com or go to my website, bigislandtinyfootprint.com. When you do that, you can sign up for a half-an-hour lesson wherever you are. We will make it work, and believe me, there is more than enough information that you could ever get from a half-an-hour session that you will ever use in the beginning of guitar. I do cater to advanced guitar players when they want to take the idea of knowing more than just major, minor. You know all of your modes, you're working on phrasings, and you're working on different genres. So if you can do a little like bossa nova, jazz, rock and roll, awesome. The next step is to kind of move that and hear those different patterns in different types of genres, and then try to put it into your own playing so you can pizzazz yourself. Don't really know what this channel is supposed to be, but I'm having fun doing it as it stands. Anyway, thank you for being here today and asking questions. Chloe, thank you for being here too. I gotta tell you, I'm probably gonna work on the Tetris theme later because it's in my head. Maybe even play the Bumblebee. That would be cool to do on bass, wouldn't it?